All right, last year I created a pretty in-depth video showing off how I, as a full-on Android enthusiast, set up my iPhone 13 Pro. And so I thought I'd follow suit again this year, but of course this time with my iPhone 14 Pro. And again, as an Android user, it's always been a bit of an interesting challenge to try and make the switch as seamless as can be, despite a lot of the apps I use in the Android world just simply not being available on iOS. So with that being said, let's take a look at what is on my iPhone 14 Pro. Now, as always, before we chat about the apps themselves, let's very briefly discuss my home screen setup itself. I've got everything I want on my home screen here on this one page, and you can kind of break it up into three sections, if you will. Up the top, we have two small widgets. The one on the left is just a clear spaces widget, which is how we're getting that blank space. And the one on the right is a smart stack widget. And this contains another clear spaces widget, as well as a shortcut to quickly change the system theme of the phone, which we'll come back to in a minute. Now below that is a beautiful weather, clock, date, and battery percentage widget, which I found over on Reddit, and I'll link it below as well. And then finally, below that, we have 7 application icons, as well as a folder with 9 app shortcuts. And each of these shortcuts are using icons from my latest icon pack called the Vibrant Icon Pack, which you can pick up over on my website. I've set all of these icons up using the Icon Board application, but also covered how to recreate this entire setup in full detail in a video I posted last month to the channel, so I'll leave a link to that up in the cards and down below if you're interested. But as mentioned, if we swipe on this smart stack and tap this shortcut here, you can see that the entire setup switches to this beautiful dark mode setup with just the tap of a single button. And even though it appears as though just the wallpaper and system theme are changing when I do that, it's actually the entire home screen that changes with a new set of icons made specifically to line up with this wallpaper and with the dark theme. This dark mode setup actually becomes automatically activated at 8 PM each night, and then the light theme setup is restored at 7 AM each day. So the shortcut's just there in case I ever want to switch the theme manually myself. Again, I covered how to set this all up in that home screen setup guide. It's a pretty cool trick using iOS's focus modes, and I've loved using this feature ever since it was introduced with iOS 15. Just one update to this setup though is that I'm actually now using a different wallpaper for the light theme here. This one is called Blueberry, and it's also from my Swirl wallpaper pack. But if I lock the phone here, you can see that I'm actually using the main version for the lock screen. And then when we unlock the phone, I've then switched it to the iOS light variant. And that's how we're achieving this invisible dock down here. Similar to that, when we switch to the dark mode setup, I'm also using a different wallpaper here called Grape, again, also from my Swirl wallpaper pack. And if I lock the screen again, you can see that I've also got the main version here. And then when we unlock the phone, we've got the iOS dark wallpaper, again, so that the dock remains invisible. If you like the look of these wallpapers, then you can pick them up over on my website. But these wallpapers, in conjunction with the icons, a few handy applications, and some tricks and automations, is how I've managed to pull off what I think is a pretty visually striking and clean home screen setup. And I know a lot of people love to comment how complicated it is to set this up, but in all honesty, after doing this for a few years now, once you have the design of your setup locked in, the actual setup process takes like 10-15 minutes total. It's really not that bad. Oh, and some people say that they don't like that notification badges are not visible when using custom app icons like this. And that is true, but something to keep in mind is that they're still visible in the app drawer. And in all honesty, I kind of enjoy not seeing notification badges on the home screen because I reckon it actually helps me to use my phone less. Anyhow, with the setup out of the way, let's now chat about the apps that I use. On the home screen, we have the phone application, then Messages, Google Maps, Google Chrome, Gmail, WhatsApp, and Twitter. And each of these apps are relatively self-explanatory, but I will say it's handy using Google Maps, Google Chrome, and Gmail here instead of Apple's variants, as that way all of my data automatically syncs across when I switch back to using an Android device. Oh, and what's really nice now is that when you're setting up an iPhone from a factory reset state, you now have the option to restore all of your WhatsApp messages from an Android device during the setup process, which is a really, really nice feature to have. It also works the other way around as long as you have a factory reset Samsung or Google Pixel device running Android 12 or later. The only thing you can't do is transfer your chat history after a device is set up, which is kind of annoying. I really wish WhatsApp acted a little more like Telegram in this regard, where every message is synced across immediately after you sign in, which makes a lot more sense. But hey, at least there's an option at all, which wasn't the case a year ago, believe it or not. But then within this folder here, we have Spotify, the App Store, Facebook Messenger, the camera app, settings, YouTube Studio, Pocket Casts, which is my go-to podcasting app of choice, not only here on iOS, but also on Android, thanks to the fact that it's just a great podcasting app, but also because it supports cross-device syncing. This means I can literally be halfway through a podcast on my iPhone and then pick up straight away where I left off on my Android phone. I love it. And then the final app in this folder here is the stock Apple Reminders application, which is just about the only stock Apple app that I use. Of course, aside from the Messages app and the Phone app. And that's because over on the Android side of things, I actually use a reminders application called Memorigi, and I love that application, but unfortunately, there is still no iOS version available. And so funnily enough, whenever I start using an iPhone, I sit there with Memorigi open on my Android phone and the reminders app open on the iPhone, and I manually reset up every recurring task in the reminders app. And then I do the same thing, but in the opposite direction whenever I've finished reviewing the iPhone. That's just about the only app that I have to do that for, so it's not a huge deal, but fingers crossed an iOS version of Memorigi is released sometime between now and whenever the next iPhone is released. All right, from there, we'll swipe over to the app library. And as I mentioned in my review of this phone, I still don't love the app library implementation because whenever I open it, it often takes me a solid beat or two to find the app I'm looking for. But aside from that, there are a few apps that I want to make mention of. Now, firstly, whilst Apple has its own inbuilt password manager, as does Google on the Android side of things, none of my information gets transferred across when I switch between the two operating systems. And so to solve this issue, I've just recently started using this application here called RoboForm Password Manager. And a huge shout out to the team at RoboForm for being kind enough to sponsor today's video. If you haven't heard of it, RoboForm is actually the #1 ranked password manager that has been around for over 20 years now. And simply by using this tool, it makes my life easier. It not only safely stores my passwords for me, but it also quickly logs me into any account with just a click or tap of a single button. RoboForm also allows me to generate passwords that are outrageously strong and secure, and I can even use it to save and then quickly fill in credit card information. And my favorite part is that RoboForm syncs my information across all devices and applications I use. My iPhone 14 Pro here, my Pixel 7 Pro, my Windows editing machine, my Mac laptop, as well as every app installed on any of these devices. And this means I literally never have to worry about forgetting a password again. So to level up your online security, sign up for RoboForm everywhere today. And if you use the link in the description, you'll get a very handy 30% off the upgraded plans. All right, let's close that. And from there, we'll open up the social folder. And aside from all of the basics, I do actually have a public channel Discord, hence why the app is installed here. Link below if you want to join that. I do also occasionally use Telegram. And if you didn't know, I am actually quite active on TikTok with a healthy little following. So if you're keen to see what I post there, I've left a link to where you can follow me also below. After that, we have the utilities folder, but there's really nothing worth mentioning in here. So we'll close that and skip ahead to the productivity and finance folder. And within here, I've got to say, I still love using Bring, which is a shopping list application that works perfectly on both iOS and Android. And it is a phenomenal app for sharing shopping lists between users. So my wife and I use this every single week, and I really appreciate how similar the experience is with this app on both iOS and Android. I also do not use the stock Apple Calendar app, but instead opt to use Google Calendar, again, so that it works on both operating systems, no problem. I also don't use the stock Apple Notes app, but instead use Notesnook, which I've mentioned quite a bit on the channel in the past, but it's basically a really powerful note-taking app that works on both iOS and Android, and they also have a browser version as well. And I've got to say, it makes such a difference being able to access all of my notes on any operating system or device I need to. As mentioned, I of course use the Shortcuts app here to set up all of my custom app shortcuts and automations. And I also use an app here called Taskade to keep a track of my work schedule and any shot lists I create. I also use this app on Android and on my Mac and PC, so great that it's also got cross-device syncing as well. And then finally, I also use this app called Wise, formerly known as TransferWise, as basically my business bank account. Again, that works on Android as well, and they of course have a browser version available, which is great. All right, let's close that folder and open up the creativity folder. And the main apps I use in here are Google Photos, Icon Board, the preview app for previewing all of my Instagram posts before publishing them. And then the last app of note in this folder is Widget, which is of course what I use to set up any of the cool looking widgets on my home screen. If you're an Android user and a fan of customization, then this app is kind of like KWGT, but for iOS, and it's almost as powerful as well, which is super impressive. The only limitations of the app are due to iOS and not the app itself. All right, let's close that and we'll skip the information and reading folder because there's really nothing interesting in there, but we'll open up the entertainment folder. And yes, I am a pretty big cricket fan, so I use the ESPN Cricket Info app to keep up to date on all of the latest scores. And that's really the only app worth mentioning in this folder. Down in this other folder, the only apps I regularly use here are the Ecovacs Home app for starting the robot vacuum in my office remotely. I also use Google Home, Google Maps, and the LifeX app very occasionally, and that's about it. I literally never use any of these health and fitness apps, and so with that being said, that's really all there is to my iPhone 14 Pro. Oh, just one other thing to mention is that whenever I finish using an iPhone device and I'm about to move my SIM back into an Android phone, then before I do so, I'll make sure to head into the system settings, scroll down to the messages section, and then disable iMessage. Anytime I've accidentally left this toggle on, I've ended up missing a couple of messages when I've then switched back to using an Android phone. So remembering to do this is a key part of the switching back process. And so there you have it. That is what is on my iPhone 14 Pro. We've got a clean home screen setup that switches themes automatically every single day. Plus, we've got a collection of applications that I think makes the process of switching back and forth between Android and iOS relatively seamless. As always, links to everything mentioned throughout the video, including my vibrant icon pack and my swirl wallpaper pack, have been included down in the description below. But that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you later.